Happy Families podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
Let's put this into context and accept and acknowledge that every now and again the children are going to be unkind towards one another, and that's life.
And now here's the stars of our show, my mum and dad.
It's just occurred to me, we're in September. It's the 7th of September. What has happened to the year? Mrs. Coulson, Mrs. Happy Families. No one's travelling. Half the country's in lockdown.
I think everybody's just renovating.
Yeah.
Do you know how hard it is to find a tradie these days?
We had to call a tradesman recently and...
They told us he couldn't come till next year.
Yeah, that's right. Like August
Not
next
to mention how much the price had increased since last year when we had him quote.
We're talking, this is a special week about COVID this week. We're talking about all the dramas associated with raising a family during COVID. But let's just acknowledge the reality that if you want to get a tradie during COVID, I really chose the wrong profession, didn't I? Like tradies have got to be doing okay right now. Mind you, they are saying that prices have gone up. It's not their fault. Tough time to be renovating. Good luck if that's where you are.
A memory popped up in my Facebook feed the other day.
Right.
And I haven't shared it with you, but it was so awesome and so characteristic of Miss Ella. So Ella's 17.
Yep.
This was 5 years ago.
Okay.
6 years ago.
Okay.
6 years ago. So Ella says to me last night, Mum, why are you so awesome? My first thought was just to fob her off. But my response, I was just born that way. Her comeback was gold. Now I know why I'm so awesome. It's just in my blood. How good is that kid? She's so good.
Brilliant stuff. Oh, by the way, we are Dr. Justin and Kylie Coulson. I'm the author of a bunch of books about making your family happier. Kylie, mum to our 6 daughters and my wife since the late 1990s. I've stopped counting the years because it still feels like we're right at the beginning and there's so much to look forward to. However, COVID certainly can make some of our years feel longer. And today, as we do every Tuesday, we want to answer your questions about how to survive life with whatever you're doing family-wise. This is a special COVID question from Carol.
She says, tips for dealing with sibling rivalry.
Oh,
I have a 12-year-old boy, 7-year-old girl, and in the context of the pressure cooker of COVID, how do I help my daughter deal with her emotions? She's very good at verbalizing them, but she gets overwhelmed and reactive and blames others.
So 12-year-old boy, 7-year-old girl. And I mean, this is the thing with siblings, right? And if you've been a long-time listener of the podcast, you will have heard me say this before. As adults, we still struggle with our siblings sometimes. Like we're grown-ups, we're mature, we know how to regulate our behaviour and our emotions. We know how we're supposed to soften the relationship and make everything work okay.
Well, look, we get to live in separate houses. That makes a huge difference.
Sometimes we don't just live in separate houses. We live in separate states or countries and we still kind of roll our eyes and go, oh, do I have to spend time with my siblings? Like, really? So when I hear parents complain about the kids not getting on so well, I'm like, how old are you and how's that going for you? Like really,
but I think, she puts it into context. There's this pressure cooker and I don't think it's even COVID. COVID is definitely exacerbating it for families who are stuck in lockdown. But the reality is the pressure cooker is the family.
Yeah, that's right. But if you're in a lockdown situation and the kids, I mean, they're stuck with each other, right? Government regulations, depending on how restrictive things are where you live, may only allow you to get out of the house for an hour to see somebody from not your household for an hour, so long as you're exercising and socially distancing and running around a park or something like that. I mean, it's just so challenging. And so when parents say to me, I just want my kids to get along, right there with you. Like we've got 6 of our own daughters and it tears our hearts out when they're unkind to each other because we try so hard to model kindness in our home.
Well, on the other end, I think some of our most beautiful moments as a family is when we've just, taken a step back and heard the kids in the background and everyone's laughing or they're just having a conversation together. It's just, it's like the angels are singing. The heavens are streaming down and it just feels so good when you have those moments.
I guess my point is we as adults didn't get along with our siblings when we were younger, for the most part. Pretty much everyone I talk to says, didn't get on with my brother or my sister or whatever. And even as adults, we still struggle with them now. And so our expectation that our children are going to get along with their siblings may be a little unfair. And developmentally, it's hard because they don't have the same skills that we do in terms of emotional behavioural regulation, ability to communicate. And sometimes they're sharing the same room. In COVID, they're sharing the same house 23 hours a day. So it's really unfair. The other point.
Where's the other hour?
Well, that's when they're going and exercising. They get out of the house and they don't have to put up with their sibling for that hour, depending on how old they are. But, I mean, you've got a 7-year-old and a 12-year-old. Like, they're stuck right now in a lockdown situation. The other thing that strikes me when I think about this whole parenting and sibling getting along with others situation is they didn't actually choose to be siblings. The parents made the choice to have the sibling. They're stuck with somebody that they didn't even choose to be with. But here's the great irony here. Even as adults who have chosen to be in a mutual and consensual, intimate relationship, I've picked you, Kylie. I've said you're the one that I want to be with for the rest of my life, forever. You're my everything. You complete me, to quote Tom Cruise in Jerry Maguire. Was it Jerry Maguire?
I don't know.
It was you. There's a you complete me line. I'm pretty sure it's in Jerry Maguire. And yet we still struggle to get along sometimes.
What are you saying?
Oh, I'm just being honest. Like every intimate relationship that I'm aware of.
You can be a bit testy sometimes.
I can be. Really? You're going to put that up? I can't believe that you're saying that.
Well, look, everyone listening is my friend.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And I can't say what happened just a couple of weeks ago when I wasn't testy, but somebody sure was. Not saying anything about that. So again, the point is we struggle even as adults to get along with the person that we've chosen to be with. And so to ask the kids to get along with one another, I just think sometimes our expectations on the kids are a little bit unfair. Does that mean we should give up and say, oh, well, they're not going to get along? No, of course not. It just means let's put this into context and accept and acknowledge that every now and again the children are going to be unkind towards one another, and that's life. And sometimes they're going to be brutally unkind, and sometimes it's not going to be sometimes. Sometimes it's going to feel like it's all the time. But we do need to help. So we're fast running out of time already and we've got to take a break. But before we do that, I want to share my number one tip that I've been experimenting with lately. I had a conversation with Dr. Jodie Richardson. She wrote a book with Michael Gross called Anxious Kids. And we were catching up a few weeks ago and it was a really interesting discussion that we had. And she shared with me a line that she has found extraordinarily useful. And I thought, I'm all for a simple script. I don't know anyone that'll say no to a script. Tell me if you've noticed that I've been saying this lately. I'll say to the kids when they're fighting, I'll say, Annie, is that helpful? Have you heard me say that?
No.
Oh, where have you been? I'm the only one doing any parenting around here. For goodness sakes.
I've probably been hanging the washing. That pile just keeps getting bigger and bigger these days.
Yeah, laundry. That's what you do, right? Laundry. That's it. Laundry and cooking. And I've just found that one question, because here's the thing. Sometimes if we sit down with the kids and we say, oh, we want to have a nice family, and we start the lecture about how our family should feel and how it should be and how we're supposed to respect one another and treat one another nicely. And in the moment, the reality is they don't care. They're upset. They're feeling offended. They're feeling like their brother or their sister is the worst person on the whole planet, and we're trying to tell them to be nice. And they look at us and they're like, I don't care. I just don't care. So a helpful question is this helpful? And it changes the focus of what we're doing. We immediately become oriented towards moving in a positive direction rather than dwelling on all the dramas that are happening in that sibling relationship. Do you like that?
That sounds great. Well, right after the break, I'll share a few of my ideas.
It's the Happy Families Podcast.
Imagine a home where discipline got results without anyone having to feel bad or in trouble. The Do's and Don'ts of Discipline is a webinar to help parents set limits with love, compassion and humanity. Find it now at happyfamilies.com.au/shop.
It's the Happy Families Podcast, the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now. And today we are hopefully helping Carol with her pressure cooker challenge of children and sibling rivalry. So a couple of things that we do in our house that it just makes such a difference. And we've talked about them lots of times on the podcast. We have these personal parenting interviews with our kids.
Yep.
And
once a week.
And what we find is that when things aren't going well, our kids have got their own issues that they're dealing with. When you talk about what Carol's describing, their family, stuck in lockdown and all of the challenges with that, all of the family members, mum, dad and siblings are all dealing with it in different ways. And having that safe space where they can just talk one-on-one with mum, what's going well right now? Let's actually look at that. What's going well? You might not be able to find anything because things feel so hard right now, and that may be the problem.
Whether it's COVID or not, this is a great process to go through.
Yeah, and then let's talk about what's not going well. And 9 times out of 10, if there's a lot of conflict, your child's going to pinpoint that. It's not you pointing out that it's gone wrong. They are actually able to acknowledge it themselves.
What's really going on here is we are modelling the very perspective that we want them to be able to exhibit with their siblings.
Yeah.
When we sit down and we get curious, not furious, when we sit down and we understand, don't reprimand, when we explore rather than explode, what we're effectively doing is we are modelling the exact behaviour that we want them to exhibit themselves when they're going through challenges with their siblings or just in life in general. We're giving them the strategy by walking through it as a mature parent who's gently guiding, not by teaching explicitly, but rather just by showing this is how we resolve our challenges. We look at what's going right, what's going wrong, and then we focus on what we can do to make things better.
We had an amazing conversation last week with Wally Goddard.
Oh, yes.
And
Yeah.
there was so much out of what he said that just fits in beautifully with what we're talking about today. But one of the things that really stood out to me, he talked about compassion.
Before we talk about what he said about compassion, in case you missed the conversation, please go back to last Wednesday. We'll link to it in the show notes. Conversation with Professor H. Wallace Goddard, a mentor to me for nearly 20 years now. The guy was just, he was so good and we got so much positive feedback. And his comments about compassion are just so perfect for this discussion that we're having now.
He just articulated it so well. If we want our children to understand and learn compassion, we need to model it. But what happens in most homes when we're dealing with sibling rivalry, we catch the emotion of the room, don't we?
Right.
We blow up as parents and we kind of, I wish you would just stop. And yet the recognition that if we want our children to be soft with one another, then we need to show them a different way of doing it. And I just loved that.
So your conversation about sitting down with the kids and just exploring their world with them, asking them what's going right and what's going wrong, it's an exercise in compassion. It's giving our children a sense that we are suffering right there beside them, not in judgment, not telling them how it ought to be, not there to fix things, but just to listen and be with them. And that conversation, it teaches empathy. It gives them it teaches what it is to take perspective, and it teaches them that they are not alone.
With 6 girls in our house, we've had our fair share of sibling rivalry.
And opportunities to show compassion.
And in those conversations, when we ask, what's going wrong, they will often get very, very worked up about the injustice of the way they're being treated by other siblings. And it can be very easy for a parent to step in and tell them, well, if you just stop doing X, Y, and Z, that you would alleviate a lot of the challenge.
You know what I call that, by the way? Victim blaming. When you've got a child who's been hit by their big brother and you say, well, if you didn't tease them, it wouldn't happen, you're actually blaming the victim. You're teaching your children that they're the reason that their sibling has treated them badly. Everyone gets upset about victim blaming out in the community, but we teach it in our homes.
But it's interesting, even when they are in the wrong, telling them that they're in the wrong while they're suffering is not helpful.
No learning happens.
And so the opportunity that we have as parents to sit with them in that space and suffer with them.
Yeah.
They're hurting. This hurts.
Put your arms around them, give them a hug and say, it's really hard, isn't it? This is so hard. Being stuck in lockdown, not seeing your friends, not being able to get out and do the things that you care about, missing birthdays, missing horse riding or missing soccer or netball or whatever it is. I'm using horse riding because we've promised one of our kids horse riding for months and months and months. Not that I want to do it because it's going to cost an absolute fortune, but we've promised her and so she's going to get to do it. But lockdowns have even gotten in the way of that for her. And just sitting and putting her arms around and saying, wouldn't it be great if it was different? This is so hard. That's the stuff that matters. And the kids feel understood. Here's the other thing that I'm going to say. I'm throwing my list out. I had a whole lot of things that I was going to say, and I love what you've raised. So we might wrap it up with this. Your children actually know how to behave the right way. They know that they're supposed to treat their siblings with kindness. They know that they're not supposed to pull hair, call names, say nasty things, all that sort of. They know that. But they get caught up in the moment. And when we sit down with them and we have that compassion, when we have that perspective, when we have that empathy, when we model the very thing that we need them to demonstrate themselves, they feel safe, they feel understood, their emotions calm right back down, and then they go out and they treat people well. We don't actually have to do any explicit teaching at all.
And the wonderful thing about this process is that we we show them that we trust that the answers are in them. We don't have to fix the problem. 9 times out of 10, they'll work this out by themselves, but they just need to feel heard.
Can you hear this? That's my list of ideas that I was going to share. I love what you had to say there, and I'm grateful that we were able to have this conversation. Carol, we really hope that this is helpful for you and that it makes a difference in your home with your kids and their sibling squabbles, and for any parent who's either in a lockdown or not, who's got kids who are not getting along particularly well. We hope that this has been a helpful conversation. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rulon from Bridge Media. Craig Bruce is our executive producer. We hope that you love the podcast so much that you'd be willing to take about 60 seconds to jump into the Apple Podcasts app or wherever you get your podcasts and leave a 5-star rating and review. When you do that, what happens is that the Apple algorithm realizes that people are listening, they're leaving comments, they're enjoying the podcast, and it raises the profile of our podcast so that more people can find it. And that means more people get to make their families happier and solve those sibling challenges and all the rest of it as well. So please jump online and take 60 seconds. We'd be so very grateful if you would do that. If you'd like to know more about making your family happier, by the way, check out our Happy Families memberships. Oh, and the Miss Connection Summit. It's happening early October. The early bird special doesn't last much longer. Please go and find out about it. If you've got kids between 8 and 18, it's all about raising tween and teen girls with some of the best experts on that in the country. Joining me for the Miss Connection Summit in the next few weeks. Check it out at happyfamilies.com.au.